We are going to be looking at solving one-step and two-step equations with word problems, okay? So an important thing to remember with any word problem is you want to read the question and understand it the best that you can. When it comes to solving one and two-step equation word problems, we want to be able to write an equation that's going to represent that question that we're solving, okay, before we solve it, because we want to know what exactly we're trying to figure out with the question. Um, so looking at an example of this, okay, we have this question. It says Landberry Middle School spends $17 for every workbook that it buys. At most, how many workbooks can Landberry Middle School buy if it has $34 to spend? Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to kind of go through and highlight those important pieces of information that are going to be used to solve this question. So the first thing I would say, now the middle school name is not important when coming up with the equation, but it is important to notate that they're spending $17 for every workbook that is bought, okay? And the next piece of information we want to highlight is at most, how many of these workbooks can they buy if they have $34 to spend? Okay, that's giving us an important piece of information by saying that they're spending $17 and they only have the $13 to spend. So we want to go through and we want to figure out, okay, number one, what is our variable going to represent? Okay, we know that the cost of the workbook is $17, but we don't know how many workbooks that we're going to be buying. Okay, so we're going to say that the workbooks are going to be represented by our variable. Okay, and we're actually going to say that we're going to multiply. Okay, because the way you figure that is we're saying that every one of the workbooks is going to be $17. So if we have 5 workbooks that we can buy just before we even solve, we would actually add those together, 5, or we can multiply 17 times 5, okay? So we would say that we have 17x. Now, reading the question, there's really nothing that we're adding or subtracting past there, but we know that the total can be 34. Okay, so this is the equation that we're going to start with. This is the equation that's going to give us that answer of how many workbooks that this middle school is able to buy. Now we can solve this just as we would a one-step equation. We know we already discussed that if we knew what that variable was, we would actually multiply that number by 17. So we're going to do the inverse operation and we're going to divide. And we want to divide both sides by whatever that number is that is with x. We want to get that variable by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by 17. Now, you can always go through, you can, using a calculator, but it's very simple to look at this and say, okay, 7 times 2 is 14. So looking at that, we know that the 4, is important. And we could say that, 17 times 2, let's just try that because we already said 7 times 2 is going to be 14. So what about 17 times 2? So 14, carry your 1, 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more will give you 3. And that's going to check for you and say that you can buy a total of 2 workbooks. This middle school can buy 2 workbooks. And we really kind of already checked our answer with this by saying, 17 times 2. We kind of already plugged in that 2 to check and make sure that it's going to equal, it's going to be equal to 34. So looking at another example here, okay, we'll clear all that stuff off. We want to read this question again and try to figure out where is our variable going to go? Where are we going to plug in a variable to represent that quantity that can change? So this says Ruth prepares 5 kilograms of dough every hour she works at the bakery. How many hours did Ruth work if she prepared 25 kilograms of dough? So again, before we even start with this one, we're going to just go through and highlight some important key factors that we're looking at. So it says that Ruth prepares 5 kilograms of dough. So this preparing 5 kilograms, that's really important because it's telling you that number that she prepares for every hour. Okay, I'm going to highlight the hour. Every hour she works in a different color. All right, and then it says how many hours. So we want to know how many hours did Ruth work if she prepared 25 kilograms of dough? So as we can see here, we have this number 5. So I'm going to write this here. Okay, we have this number 5. And we know that this is going to count for every hour that she works. But then in the question, it says how many hours? So we don't know how many hours that she has worked. So we're going to go ahead and say that the hours is going to be represented by X. X is going to equal the amount of hours that Ruth works. Okay, so we're gonna multiply this too, because we're saying that as with the workbook question, if let's say that Ruth works, 7 hours, we would, it would be 5 every 7 hours. So then we could just multiply it by that. So in this case, we're going to say 5 times X, and then we're going to say that the total amount of kilograms of dough that she prepared was 25. And now we have this one-step equation that we can go back and we can use those inverse operations to solve. So we would know that if we knew what X is equal to, we would multiply by 5. So in this case, we're going to do the inverse operation, and we are going to divide by this number that's with X. So we're going to divide both sides of the equal sign by 5. And that is going to tell us that X is equal to, and 25 divided by 5, we would say is 5. So we would say that she worked 5 hours to prepare 25 kilograms of dough. And you can always check this answer by plugging this in for X. 5 times 5 will give you 25, and we could say that this works. All right. Look at another example. And I encourage you to look at these examples and, try to solve them before we go through them. And then that way you can double check and follow along. Okay. You can always pause the video. So this question says, a person can pay $14 for a membership to the Science Museum and then go to the museum for just $1 per visit. What is the maximum number of visits a member of the Science Museum can make for a total cost of $48? So let's go through and highlight those key pieces of information. So we know that the person can pay $14 for a membership, okay? And then we know that the person can go to the museum for just $1 a day, just $1 per visit after they buy that membership. And then we can also say that we want to know, and I'm actually going to highlight this in green still because it says just $1 per visit, but then we want to know what the maximum number of visits a member can take to the Science Museum if they're paying $48. Okay. So now that we have all of these pieces of information, we could go back through and we could set up our equation. So we're saying that a person can pay $14 for a membership. So that's important, the 14, okay? That's telling us that there's a set rate that they can pay one time in order to get that membership to the museum. Then we're saying that for just $1 per visit, they can go anytime after that. So we would actually add this with, we could say 1 times, we'll say that X. So X is going to represent the number of visits. Okay. The number of visits. 1 times X, which we all know that that's just going to be 14 plus X. Okay. And then the total cost that we're going to set this equal to is going to be 48, because that's the total amount that this person wants to pay. Doesn't want to pay more than $48. So we want to see how many visits this person can take with this set amount. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to use our inverse operations. We have our equation set up. Now we can go through and solve. So this 14, even though there's not a sign in front, we know that that means that this is a positive number. So the inverse operation is going to be to subtract 14 from both sides of the equal sign, okay? That's going to mean that this 14 minus 14 is going to cancel for us, leaving us with just X on this side. And then we could say 48 minus 14. 8 minus 4 is going to give us 4, and then 4 minus 1 is going to give us 3. That means that this person who only wants to spend $48 and who paid $14 for a membership can actually go to the Science Museum 34 times with that amount. Okay, so it gives us a good idea of how many times they can take that trip to the museum. All right. We're going to look at a couple more examples. We're going to see some of these two-step equations in here as well. Okay. So in this question, it says Jake already has 20 flowers in his garden, and he can also grow 8 flowers with every seed packet that he uses. How many seed packets does Jake need to have a total of 36 flowers in his garden? Okay, we're going to go through and highlight some of these important key facts that we need for the equation. So it says that Jake already has 20 flowers in his garden. Okay, is already starting with 20 flowers. The next piece of information is that he can grow 8 flowers with every seed packet. And then it wants to know how many seed packets. Okay, so that's an important thing to look for, is the fact that we know that he can grow 8 flowers with every seed packet, but we want to know how many packets that we need. And then the last piece is that Jake wants to have a total of 36 flowers in his garden. Now we can go through and we can just set everything up as our equation. So we know that he already has 20 flowers. And we're going to add this because we're already starting with this amount and we want to figure out how many more do we need. So we're going to add this, and we're going to say that the seed packets is actually going to be represented by X because we want to figure out how many seed packets do we need. Okay, and with every seed packet, we know that Jake can grow 8 flowers, and he wants a total, so equals 36. And here we have a two-step equation. Okay, just by reading the question and setting it up using all of those important key factors that we determined from the question, we can solve to figure out how many seed packets does Jake need. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to work away from the variable. So we want to start with this 20. This 20 does not have the variable, so we're going to leave 8x alone for right now. Again, 20 doesn't have a sign in front of it, so we know that that's a positive, so the inverse is going to be to subtract. Okay, subtract 20 from both sides of the equal sign. Okay, this is going to cancel, and it's going to leave us with just 8x. Okay, now we have 8x and 36 minus 20. 6 minus 0 is going to give us 6, and 3 minus 2 is going to give us 1. So then our next step is we want to get that variable by itself completely. We want to know how many seed packets does Jake need to get the amount of flowers that he wants for his garden. So we know that if we knew what x was, if we knew what the variable was equal to, we would go ahead and we would divide, or we would multiply both sides, or the x by 8. So in this case, we're going to use the inverse operation. We're going to divide both sides by 8. So then we have, this is going to cancel to equal just 1. So we're left with x is equal to, and then 16 divided by 8 is going to give us 2. So that's telling us that Jake is going to need 2 seed packets in order to get the total amount of flowers that he wants for his garden. Okay, the next question that we're going to look at, oops, there we go, is going to be right here. And this one says Rose knits 7 centimeters of scarf every night. How many nights will Rose have to spend knitting in order to knit a total of 35 centimeters of scarf? Okay, so we're going to start by getting those important pieces of information. And it says that Rose knits 7 centimeters of scarf each night. Okay, and we want to know how many nights, so I'm going to highlight this in yellow, how many nights will Rose have to spend in order to get to a total of 35 centimeters of scarf? Okay, now if Rose, if she's knitting for like 8 nights, we know that that would be 7 centimeters all 8 of those nights. So 7 for the first night, 7 for the second night. So a good way to do this is instead of adding 7 8 times, and 8 is just, it's not the answer, but it's just to give you an idea of why it's important to multiply. Instead of adding 7 8 times, we're just going to multiply 7. And then we actually, looking at this part of the question, how many nights? So we don't know how many nights that Rose is going to have to knit just yet. So we're going to represent the nights by X. Okay, so 7 times X. And we want the scarf to be equal to 35 centimeters. So here we have a one-step equation that we're looking at. So we want to go through, and now we want to get X by itself. We want to solve for what is X going to be equal to? How many nights is Rose going to have to spend knitting in order to get to 35 centimeters? Okay, so if we knew what X was, if we knew that number, we would multiply 7 times that number. So we're going to use the inverse operation, and we're going to divide both sides by whatever number is with this variable. So we're going to divide both sides by 7. Okay, that's going to tell us that 35 divided by 7 is going to give us a total of 5, which also tells us that Rose needs to be, she needs to knit for 5 nights in order to get to that 35 centimeters of scarf. Okay. And then we have one last question just to take a look at. Okay. All right. So this says Shivani had already read 2 books this year before joining a book club. Okay. And she plans to read 5 books every month now that she has joined. If Shivani has read 12 books so far, how many months has she been with her book club? Okay. So we want to know how many months if she's read that total. So we're going to go through, highlight our important pieces of information. Okay. For starters, it says that she has already read 2 books before this year. Okay, so before joining the book club, she's already read 2 books, and she plans to read 5 books. I'll do that in a different color just to match. So she has already read 5 books. That she wants to read 5 books every month. I'm sorry. She wants to read 5 books every month. And it's saying that she's already read 12 books so far, but we want to know how many months has she been with her book club, which is telling us that our variable is going to represent the amount of months. Okay, the amount of months she's been with the book club. Okay, so we know that she's already read 12 books so far. So we're going to set all of this equal to 12. And then we're going to go back and we're going to say, okay, so she's already read 2 books this year. So she's already started with 2 books. That number is not going to change. It's not going to vary. Let's put it that way. Okay. So when you talk about a variable, it is going to change. This 2 books already starting, that is not going to change. So we're going to add this. Okay. And I know I'm kind of writing it backwards, but it will make sense once it's all written. And she plans to read 5 books every month, but we don't know how many months just yet. So we're going to represent that by X. We want to know how many months she's been with this book club. Now we have a 2-step equation and we can start solving. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to draw the line to separate the equal sign. And then we're going to start away from the variable. So the first thing we're going to start with is this 2. And since it's a plus 2, we're actually going to subtract 2 from both sides of the equal sign, which is then going to cancel for us. And then we have 12 minus 2, which is going to give us 10. We're going to bring down our 5x, and we're going to set this equal to 10. Now we're going to look and we can see that we have 5 times x. So since it's multiplication, our inverse operation is going to be to divide both sides by this number that's with x. So we're going to divide both sides by 5. And we're going to say x is equal to 10 divided by 5 will give us 2. That means that Shivani has been with the book club for 2 months and has read a total of 12 books.